Good morning, Peekskill Middle School. Mr. Tabone here. This lesson is lesson number 8 of the Omnivore's Dilemma. I'm going to do some reading today. For some reason, YouTube wasn't letting me load the video yesterday, and then I couldn't find the video, so I'm going to record it and repost it today. We're going to read from pages 237 and 245, so if you have the reading up in front of you, go ahead and click on it. You can follow along as I read. As always, if you have any questions, shoot me an email. If you have my phone number, shoot me a message. Go on Google Hangouts or Google Meet. Mrs. Sora and I are available to help you guys out with anything you need, so please just let us know. All right, so page 237 is called The Forest, Chapter 18, Survivor, Food. There was one more meal I wanted to make. It was the meal at the end of the shortest food chain of all. What I had in mind was a dinner made entirely from foods I had hunted, gathered, and grown myself. Now, there are some people in the world, not many anymore, who make that sort of meal 3 times a day. I am not one of them. The growing part was the only part I knew we could handle. I've been a gardener most of my life, and I've made countless meals from my garden. That left hunting and gathering. I had never hunted in my life. Indeed, I had never fired a gun, unless you count cap pistols. I'd always thought of myself as pretty clumsy, and walking around with a loaded gun never seemed like a good idea. Thanks to my mother, I did have some childhood experience as a gatherer. During the summer, she would take us to the beach at low tide to dig for clams. We'd walk along the sand looking for the air holes the clams made. Then we'd dig them up until they squirted us in self-defense. At the end of the summer, we would pick beach plums that she would make into delicious jellies of the color of rubies. All winter long, her beach plum jelly brought back memories of summer vacation, August on toast. What I most remember from these early foraging, food gathering trips were the scary warnings from my mother. Some mushrooms and berries have poison in them, and she made sure I knew exactly how terrible it would be to eat one of them. When she was done, I thought eating wild mushrooms was as dangerous as touching a downed power line. As a result, I only gathered fruits I absolutely knew, like blueberries, and I never, ever touched wild mushrooms. But I was determined to have wild mushrooms on the menu of my do-it-yourself meal. I think that's because mushroom hunting seems to be a perfect example of the omnivore's dilemma. Is that mushroom good food, or is that poison? I'd have to learn to tell the difference. The first food chain. Why go to all this trouble? It's not as though we can bring back hunting and gathering as a way of life for most people. There's just not enough wild game and fruit to feed everyone. Of course, if we did go back to that way of life, some of us might really enjoy it. Ancient hunter-gatherers worked much less than the modern-day humans. It took them about 17 hours a week to hunt and gather food, enough food for them and their families. Compare that to the 40-hour or more work week we have today, and you'll be surprised to learn that hunter-gatherers ate better, grew taller, lived longer, and were healthier than civilized people. It's only in the last century that modern society has been able to match the health of its hunter-gatherer ancestors. But whether we like it or not, we are clearly not returning to those days. So why did I want to make this last meal? Because it was as close as I could get to the original food chain, the way people fed themselves for tens of thousands of years before agriculture. It is the food chain we evolved to be a part of. I thought this meal might take me back to a time when the omnivore's dilemma wasn't as complicated, when we had more direct connection with our food. It would give me a chance to look at the omnivore's dilemma in a new, or rather old, light. It has often struck me that even though modern Americans don't ever need to grow, hunt, or gather our own food, a lot of us still do. We garden, we hunt, we pick wild mushrooms or berries. Even if all you can do is grow a few tomatoes in your backyard, and even if those tomatoes end up costing twice as much as the ones you could buy in the supermarket, you do it anyway. Why? I think it's an effort to be connected once again to our food. We don't want to be passive consumers sitting at the end of a food chain and eating what we are served. My meal would be an extreme experiment in being an active and conscious eater. I had been a part of 3 different food systems: industrial organic, and beyond organic. Now I was going to be the food system. There would be nothing between me and my food from start to finish. Pollen, the hunter. I have to confess that there is more behind my desire to go hunting. Hunting is one of those skills that the all-American boy is supposed to have. at least in some parts of the country. Even the writer and philosopher Henry David Thoreau said, "We cannot but pity the boy who has never fired a gun." He wrote in his famous book, Walden, "This idea has always annoyed me. Was I less of a boy or man because I had never been hunting? Now, I was finally going to hunt. Yet deciding to hunt was one thing, doing it was another. How was I going to learn to fire a gun, let alone hunt? Did I need a license? What if I actually managed to kill something? Then what? How do you dress an animal you've killed? Dress is the word used to skin and gut an animal. Pretty weird choice of words when you think about it. And what about those killer wild mushrooms? Would I be able to learn enough to overcome my fear of eating them? What I badly needed, I realized, was a kind of hunter-gatherer tutor. I needed someone skilled in the arts of hunting and gathering who also knew a lot about the animals, plants, and fungi of Northern California. Oh yes, I forgot to mention that. On the eve of this experiment, I had just moved to Northern California, far away from the New England woods and fields I knew. I was going to have to learn to hunt and gather and garden on what amounted to be a different planet full of animals and plants I didn't know. What did people hunt here, anyway, and when did they hunt it? What time of year do the mushrooms mushroom around here and where? I had a lot to learn. My foraging guide. As luck would have it, a perfect tutor appeared in my life at exactly the right moment. Angelo Garro is a stout, burly Italian with a 5-day beard, sleepy brown eyes, and a passion about getting and preparing food. Shortly after we moved to California, I started running into Angelo. We'd been invited to a dinner party, and there would be Angelo among the guests. Only unlike the other guests, Angelo always had some story to tell about the meal. Maybe he'd gotten the halibut from a fishing boat that morning, or he picked the fennel along the highway on the drive over, or he made the wine or ham himself. And unlike the other guests, Angelo always wound up in the kitchen cooking the dinner or passing platters of his famous fennel cakes. Meanwhile, he would explain the proper way to make pasta or salami or balsamic vinegar. Hint, for the last one, you need at least 10 or 12 years and the right kind of barrels. The guy was a one-man traveling food network. After a few of these dinners, I began to piece together Angelo's story. He's a 58-year-old Sicilian who left home at 18, following a girl to Canada. 20 years later, he followed a different girl to San Francisco, where he has lived ever since. He made his living foraging wrought iron items like garden gates and fences, railings, stairs, and fireplace tools. He lives in a forge that has been a blacksmith shop since the time of the California Gold Rush in 1849. Yet his consuming passion is food. He seems driven to recapture the flavors of his childhood back in Sicily. A successful dish, he will say, is one that tastes like my mother. Several months after I met Angelo, he appeared again, this time, strangely enough, on my car radio. He was being interviewed on public radio for a story about foraging. The reporter followed Angelo on a porcini mushroom hunt, and then into a duck blind at dawn. While he waited for the sun and the ducks to rise, Angelo spoke in a whisper about his past and his passions. In Sicily, I could tell by the smell what time of the year it was. He said orange season, oranges, persimmons, olives, and olive oil. I have the passion of foraging, passion of hunting, opera, my work, he told the reporter. I have the passion of cooking, pickling, curing salamis, sausage, making wine in the fall. This is my life. I do it with my friends. It's to my heart. Even before the radio segment ended, I knew I had found my guide. The next time I bumped into Angelo, I asked him if I could tag along on his next foraging trip. Sure, okay. We go hunt chanterelle in Sonoma. I'll call you when it's time. Feeling bolder, I asked about going hunting too. Okay, we can hunt one day, maybe some duck, maybe the pig, but first you need a license and to learn to shoot. The pig? Clearly, there was even more to learn than I had thought. Hunting for dummies. It took me a couple of months to sort out the rules of getting a hunter's license. They involve taking a hunter education course and taking a test. It seems they'll sell a high-powered rifle to just about anybody in California, but it's against the law to aim the thing at an animal without a 14-hour class and multiple-choice exam. The next class was on a Saturday, 2 months off. Once I knew I'd be going hunting and gathering, something strange happened. I started looking for food everywhere I went. Suddenly, a walk in the woods wasn't just a walk. It was now a search for supper. Woody Allen once said, as a joke, that nature is an enormous restaurant. Maybe he was right. I started dividing everything I saw into two groups. Some things were probably good to eat, others were not. Of course, in most cases, I had no real idea which was which. Still, I began to notice things. I noticed the soft yellow glows of chamomile flowers on the path I hiked most afternoons. They used to make chamomile tea. I spotted clumps of miner's lettuce off in the shade. That's a tasty green I once had in my Connecticut garden. And there was wild mustard, another green growing out in the sun. There were blackberries in a flower. I even saw some wild birds that were good to eat, a few quail, a pair of doves. I began looking at field guides to help me identify all the different unfamiliar species. Okay, maybe I went a little overboard. You don't really want to turn nature into a big restaurant, but looking for food did change the way I looked at nature. It made me look more closely at everything. It made me pay attention in a way I hadn't in years. All right, so that's all the reading that you're going to need to do for today. The questions are right after the reading. If you don't understand a question or if you need help, shoot me an email, like I said, or Mrs. Sora. We can help you guys. We're in quarter 4 now, only about 9 weeks left or so, 8.5 weeks of school, and then you guys move on to the high school. So keep an eye out tomorrow, Thursday. That is May 7th. Keep your windows open. Take a look outside. You may see some of your teachers driving around to thank you guys, for doing all this work this whole time and keeping it going. We're proud of you. We are here for you if you need. We can't wait to see you again whenever that will be. But we want to tell you that we are proud of you and we're thinking about you every day. All right. Any questions? Let me know. Thanks for watching, guys. Enjoy the rest of the book and we will talk soon. Oh, and your book project is due Monday. Please get it in so we can get that grade in for quarter 4. Thanks, guys.